welcome back to another episode of Lionheart Radio. I'm your host, Rick Alexander, founder of Lou Aviv Supplement Company based in San Diego, California. I'm here with a co-host, Claudia.
Hi guys, Claudia Challoner, Doctor of Physical Therapy with Movement RX and nationally ranked powerlifter.
And today, Memo Ochoa is out. He's actually running a triathlon tomorrow.
Crazy.
Yeah, only it's shuffleboard, horseshoes, and something else. I don't know.
I'm sure heavy drinking, maybe.
Yeah. But that's the perfect segue. Today, we're going to do the whole episode on endurance training.
So we're here with my colleague, A squared, Annemarie Alf, Doctor of Physical Therapy as well. She works with Movement RX and has her own little business as well. But she just finished her first Ironman. So tell us a little bit about kind of your history, I guess, with maybe PT and how you got into endurance sports.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for having me on. This is kind of exciting. Pretty stoked to be here. So, I've been practicing PT for about 5 years now. Before that was a strength and conditioning coach, working primarily with high school elite soccer players and gymnasts. And then as a PT, I had an amazing opportunity to work with a Chinese gymnastics team for London 2012. So it's been exciting to watch the Olympics this time around and kind of follow my athletes. It's a little bit different not being there. Kind of bummed, but they still did really well. And now it's amazing to be able to be in San Diego and be with the Movement RX team and just supporting all different types of athletes, from CrossFitters to powerlifters to endurance athletes. Currently working with a lot of elite high school runners up in the Temecula area, so that's pretty cool.
And they're getting ready to go to nationals or something, or they just did?
Actually, they just finished. They finished first in the nation in their boys cross country team, and the girls second, and then they're just about to start the season again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy.
Cross country is a 5K, right?
Cross country is typically a 5K. Yeah, it varies, I guess, from course to course a little bit, but yeah, it's typically around 3 to 4 miles.
What are the best high schoolers in the country to run a 5K in? Just so we can all feel bad about how
I don't remember their exact times, but somewhere between the 15 to 20 minute time frame. Okay. It's pretty ridiculous.
And that's like trail.
Yeah,
that's trail running.
That's typically on trail, dirt, golf course, rolly hills type of environment. But then these kids in the mile, the boys are running about a 4-minute mile. And the girls are running about a 5-minute mile or just under 5-minute mile. So
no problem. Could totally do that.
I am definitely not doing that either. Never have, never will, but it's cool to, be inspired by them, honestly. But yeah, I won't be running 4 or 5-minute miles either.
Yeah.
Even though I might consider myself an endurance athlete now. Yeah, no.
So when was your Ironman? That was 4 weeks ago now?
Yeah, so I just completed Ironman Canada. Just looking at the calendar, it was almost 4 weeks ago, which is crazy to think. It's been a month since then. It seems, honestly, like it was last week still. Yeah. A little bit, yeah.
Cool.
So how did you get involved with the Chinese Olympic team? Since the Olympics are on right now,
we should definitely talk Olympics a little bit. So it's just, honestly, I spent about 8 to 10 years working with regional level gymnasts in the Region 1, which is Southern California, Northern California, Arizona, Nevada, doing camps for them, clinics, and then just through professional relationships and colleagues. A company called Exos, based out of Phoenix, Arizona, had a contract with the Chinese Olympic Committee, and they contacted me and said, we need a PT that knows gymnastics and can speak the language, and they thought that I would be a perfect fit. And
you speak Mandarin?
Do not speak any Chinese. So that was one of my first questions. I was like, well, I don't even know how to say hello in Chinese, so how's this going to work out? And they paired us up with assistants that translated for us, and we were trying to teach them along the way to kind of take over for us when we left. So it was a really interesting experience. Lots of challenges, but a lot of really cool things came out of it as well.
Exos, is that Athletes Performance Institute?
It is, yeah.
They became them? Okay.
Yeah.
Very
they
cool.
just changed their name in the last couple of years.
Okay. So you actually went to China and you worked with them for how long?
On that 2012 trip, I was there for about 6 months. prior to London 2012, and then at the games, and then another 6 months at Exos in Arizona when I returned. Then I got another contract to go back to China to help them prepare for their national games in 2013. So then I spent another 6 months, so a year in total.
Okay.
In China. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an experience.
And I still know about 10 words of Chinese.
So what was like your biggest struggle going there and like working with those athletes?
The biggest struggle, honestly, was adapting to their culture.
Yeah.
I mean, their food, the air quality, the pollution, just the stress of, at that time, I was a really young physical therapist. I had honestly been out of school for 3-4 months. The good thing was I had 10 years of experience before that, working with athletes and training and all that kind of thing. But there was obviously a lot of pressure. A lot of the things we were doing, we kind of had to prove ourselves. Like every single thing we did, I had to back it up with research and studies, and they questioned me. And so there was a lot of pressure as a young PT. But the amazing thing was I had a couple of PT mentors that were over there with me that have been in Olympic and professional sport for 15, 20 years that, you know, when I had issues or needed help, I had them there to guide me. So that was really cool.
Yeah, that's important.
What are the differences in like sport and culture, since you've worked with both cultures?
Honestly, one of the main differences is just it's more of a structured system over there. So all the athletes live together in dormitories. They train 5-6 days a week, all in the same team. They eat together. I mean, they do everything together 24/7, and that's their life. And of course, it was probably a little bit different being just prior to the Olympic Games, but we don't really have that system here in the US. It's kind of like every athlete trains on their own. They maybe have their own private coaches. The way USA Gymnastics is now, they do meet regularly on a monthly basis as a national team, and they come together. But in China, for example, and even I know in like Russia and Romania, they live together 24/7 year round pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the selection of athletes, do you know how that works in China? You always hear things about it, but I'm not.
Yeah. Well, of course we asked a lot of questions and tried to learn as much as we could. A lot of stuff gets lost in translation. Like, you wouldn't believe. But yeah, honestly, you know, again, I worked with all Summer Olympic sports, but most of my time was spent with gymnastics, so that's where I have the most knowledge. But they absolutely go searching out, like, little kids when they're young that they think have talent, and then they are picked to be on their provincial team. So they start at a province level, and then they're maybe selected to be on a junior national team, and then moved up to national team level. So there's definitely, you know, they're definitely started and kind of scouted at a younger age. But honestly, their training that I saw on a day-to-day basis is no different than what I see in gymnastics gyms here. It's just the kids don't really go to school. They're only homeschooled. I mean, they're learning the basics of school, but there's no difference in terms of U.S. gymnastics training on a day-to-day level versus China gymnastics on a day-to-day level.
So in your expert opinion, why do you think we're beating the world so badly in the Olympics?
Gosh, that could be like a 3-day long conversation probably. But one thing definitely is some of the rules and the scoring in the sport have changed dramatically. Kind of back in 2008, when China was on top, they're very artistic, they're very perfectionist, but they're not very powerful. And the sport now has changed to be more powerful. And it's one thing that I kind of preached to them when I was there, and we tried to work on, was developing power in their athletes, because they typically like to pick the smaller, leaner, longer looking athletes, and the sport is not really that anymore. It's changed dramatically to be more powerful. I mean, if you look at Simone Biles, you don't get much more powerful than that. And so China did better this year. They definitely had a little bit more powerful girls, but they're still just so far behind us right now. I would like to see them catch up and like to see it be more competitive internationally, but they've got to change their selection process a little bit in the girls that they're picking, and the boys as well. It's not just female, but same thing.
Do you feel like there's a difference between like the strength training programs? as far as developing the power?
Yeah, most definitely. So I would say here in the U.S., our programming is more looking to, number one, prevent injury, first and foremost. But a big part of that is improving the way our athletes jump and land, improving their squat pattern, and then their squat strength. Whereas in China, when I first got there, it was just like sport-specific strength, and that was it. So they were just, everything they were doing was replicating exactly what they were doing in their skills. But in the end of the day, that doesn't make them more powerful. So
do you felt like there was a higher rate of that overuse injury because they were more specific as just doing that one single thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was, I'd say 98% of what I saw was overuse injuries.
Overuse, yeah.
And then their way of rehabilitating, at the time was very limited. The more Western-based PT model was kind of non-existent there. They only believed in Chinese medicine. So, their athletes would get treatment every day, but it was just Chinese medicine, and then they go right back to training. Or maybe some modified training if they were really injured. But their rehab principles in terms of exercise and
no movement coaching really.
Strength, there was no movement coaching whatsoever. It was crazy. So, we tried to implement, that was our job of being there. I think it's still there a little bit. We definitely made some impact, but you can't change a culture overnight. I mean, that would be it's a 20-year-long process until they really evolve to where we are. Yeah.
So what are the main differences between like Chinese culture and Western? Or medicine, I mean, not culture.
Oh, in terms of medicine. Well, I mean, the traditional Chinese medicine we saw, sometimes I was like, wow, oh my God. So honestly, I remember walking into the gym to kind of do my assessment my second day in China, and I saw these male athletes with all these bruises on their back, and I was like, oh my God, what is that? And my assistant was like, oh, Annemarie, that's totally normal. That's traditional Chinese cupping. And I'm like, what is Chinese cupping? And so that was one thing that was different at the time. I had never seen it as a PT or strength coach until 2012. So that was my first experience of like, whoa, this is different. And then, athletes were they were getting massage, but the massage was very superficial, very gentle, nothing specific. Acupuncture, I had some knowledge of, but the athletes their Chinese doctors would treat them with that 3, 4, 5 times a week. Versus our more Western medicine model, especially the way that I practiced, is more movement-based. Evaluating movement, assessing movement, treating with movement techniques. Yes, of course, I use some soft tissue and other like joint mobilization techniques, but their whole view on movement was kind of non-existent. It was really just starting in 2012. They were just becoming aware of the FMS screen or the SFMA evaluation technique.
We talked a little bit about that
but
before.
It wasn't really part of their culture or anything like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wasn't utilized regularly.
Interesting.
It's interesting how some of that is kind of coming to this culture, though. It's bleeding into Western culture. Because like cupping's pretty popular now, and
absolutely. So that's
dry needling.
One thing I would say is that I learned is blending the two ideas together is how the athletes ultimately return to pain-free activity and higher performance levels more quickly. So using acupuncture or dry needling and cupping with movement-based therapy techniques, I just saw such a change in the athletes so much more dramatically. And I think that's why in Western culture now, like obviously it just got completely blown up by Michael Phelps having spots all over his back, which is kind of crazy, but Michael Phelps doesn't just get cupping and that's the end of his treatment day. Michael Phelps probably does tons of
a lot of other stuff.
Shoulder stability and activation and stabilization. I mean, whatever word you want to use, I promise you he's not just doing cupping.
Right.
Yeah.
So the Russians put out a statement and they were talking about basically because Michael Phelps does the cupping or whatever, it's like equivalent to doping. Did you see that? I was like, okay, Russia.
I missed that. But yeah.
Pretty much the same thing.
Somehow increasing specific blood flow to tissues is the same as doping.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll read some science on that one.
So did you, some of the athletes that you treated, did you kind of develop a relationship with them?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's kind of hard because of the language. The athletes speak very little English. They know basic English, like how to say hello. But over time, I mean, over 6 months, we were able to get along well enough. I mean, personally, we got along super well. Those girls became like my little sisters, and I think they really looked up to me. And one of the cutest things they ever said to me was that I reminded them of Shawn Johnson, who was our big American gymnast at the 2008 games, and they thought that I looked exactly like her, and I had her smile, and I was like, oh my god, that's such a compliment. Like, Shawn Johnson is amazing. Yeah. But I think it was just because the blondish hair and the blue eyes, like, you know, I'm an American girl, but they love Shawn Johnson, and so that was pretty cool. So yeah, we got on really well, and it kind of got to the point when we're in London, I didn't have a translator, and I had to take a couple of the kids to the doctor and get some imaging and stuff, and it was like we could communicate enough that I knew what they were trying to tell me in Chinese/broken English, and then I could translate to the doctors in England with their British accent, and the Chinese didn't understand that English at all.
Right.
And so it was kind of humorous and funny, but I kind of wish I would have known more Mandarin or had the opportunity to learn more, but it was just too hard. It was just too much pressure of like treatment and trying to get the athletes better and trying to get some medals, and you know, those things kind of came as a priority.
It's surprising though, just Mandarin's such an easy language to learn.
Oh yeah, it's the easiest language to learn for sure. It's absolutely the easiest language to write write.
Yeah, for sure.
So now moving on, now you're working with these elite runners, and then you're also running triathlons yourself.
Yeah.
Was that by choice? Are you kind of like going down this endurance path now, or was this more of just the work presented itself?
Well, it actually started a little bit being driven by my experience in China. Twofold. The first part was because of the food in China is very different than American food, and just the pressure of working 24/7 almost while I was in China. I gained so much weight. I came home, I was like 25 pounds heavier than when I left, and I was like, oh my god, this is ridiculous. And then I happened to, about 2 months later, go watch a friend compete in Ironman Arizona. And I was really inspired by some of these people doing Ironman. I was like, first of all, in my mind, I was like, I could never do this. There's no way I could ever do an Ironman. At that point, I'd never run more than like 5 miles. And this was in 2012. And then I went to watch my friend, and I was really inspired by him and all the other athletes. I mean, there was people I was like, oh my God, I can't believe these people are doing Ironman. Like 17 hours, they're finishing at midnight. They started at 7 a.m. This is absurd. Yeah. But it kind of like lit a little fire under my butt, and I was like, come on. If these people can do it, I can do it too. Obviously, being a competitive athlete like my entire life and working around competitive athletes, it kind of was like, all right, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this next year. So then, like 2 weeks later, I signed up for an Ironman 70.3, which is half the distance of these athletes that I saw racing. But literally up to that point, I've kind of just like casually ridden a road bike and a mountain bike, and I'd run 5 miles. I did grow up as a competitive swimmer, so I was like pretty confident with that piece of the 3. But it was just pretty much, I just started from zero.
So you did your first half completely untrained?
No, definitely not. So I had decided in like Thanksgiving time of 2012 that I was going to do a half the following summer. So I have a really good friend who's a coach and a really good Ironman triathlete herself. And so we kind of talked about some training, and so I started training. And then 2 months later, I actually tore my ACL. I actually blew out my entire knee.
Oh, wow.
ACL,
Running?
MCL, medial lateral stress fractures, capsule just erupted. Snow skiing.
Oh, okay.
I grew up as a competitive snow ski racer, and over holiday I was skiing, and just my knee decided to blow up one day, which was really exciting.
Always.
But then I am just like, if I commit to something, I'm going to do it. So my goal was still that next summer, I already signed up for this race. I already paid for it. I'm going to figure out how to get to the finish line of this Ironman 70.3. So I trained, but very differently than the typical Ironman athlete probably trains, besides the fact that for the first 3 months or 4 months of 2013 I couldn't run because I was coming off a full knee reconstruction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had to operate on it. It was completely
Yes, it had a full
Just put some duct tape on that thing.
Yeah, not on this one.
I have a torn
No.
PCL right now.
Okay, you're good.
This one got rebuilt. ACL rebuilt, meniscus repair, and then the stress fractures, they will heal on their own, like from the time you have to take off anyways from that ACL reconstruction. But, of course, slightly advantaged having a lot of history working with a lot of athletes that have had ACL tears, and then being a PT myself, I kind of knew my limitations and how I could push myself and where I could push myself. And so in 2013, in August, I finished the first Ironman 70.3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so your training differed mostly because of volume, or?
Yeah, my volume was definitely a lot lower, big time. And then I had to focus on a lot more strength training, because after you have that ACL reconstruction, you just lose so much strength in your leg, quad, hamstring, glutes. I mean, I just focused so much more time on strength training really than I did on endurance training at that time. Yes, there was absolutely some endurance training balanced into it, but it was nothing like what, if you asked 9 out of 10 other athletes that were probably out there racing against me, it was likely completely different.
Okay. So for people that are out there that want to do an Ironman or any kind of marathon, whatever, and they find themselves restricted because of time, do you think that is a good way to go about it? Like, as far as altering your training, adding in strength training, what are your
absolutely
thoughts?
So even this time around, for full Ironman training, I had a lot of strength training built in, and I had a lot of CrossFit type training built in as well. I think that the high intensity and lower volume, I think that was really important for me in preparing for the race, when my overall volume had to be lower because of injuries, whether it was the first 70.3 or this full Ironman. Okay. Yeah.
So what kind of strength training?
A little bit of everything. Yeah.
Okay.
So, for some reason, yeah, exactly. I seem to have an issue with knee issues and knee injuries after I make the decision to do an Ironman, and none of my injuries have anything to do with like endurance training or overtraining or anything like that. So this time around, January 1st, I paid for my entry for Ironman Canada, and but I had already started like a 3-month training block. Primarily at that time, like starting to spend a lot more time on my bike, like just build base foundation. And then the end of February, one day, my leg just decided to break. I got a tibial plateau stress fracture in my left knee in the end of February. So then again, so now I had this whole plan of like how I was going to integrate strength training, CrossFit, a couple CrossFit workouts per week, and then kind of manage that with my swim, bike, run training. And then that just got all thrown out the window. So then again, it was like starting the rehab period all over again. But with that being said, I still spent tons of time on like the aerosol bike doing intervals, on the rower doing single leg intervals because I couldn't row with both legs, in the pool doing a lot of work in the pool, both from like running in the pool, so a little bit lower body weight, to just increasing my swim training, and then honestly just trying to squat, doing a lot of posterior chain type stuff, a lot of deadlifting, single leg RDLs, single leg step ups, eccentric, kind of focusing on it. It was honestly more of a rehab based program than a true like strength cycle.
Sure.
Because I had to go a lot on just what my body would tell me.
Right. How often would you mix in the long, slow distance kind of aerobic?
Honestly, not enough. Once a week.
Okay.
I would have long rides on Saturdays or Sundays. I'd have 4, 5, 6 hour bike rides on those days. That was kind of my long, slow duration day. And I couldn't really put a lot of long, slow work in on running. My knee wouldn't tolerate it. Every time I tried to run, my knee would just swell up. And so a lot of extra time on the bike, and then, just time in the pool. I guess technically those are long, slow duration days in the pool.
Okay.
But it's only an hour. So in the world of Ironman, an hour is not a long, slow duration day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of my question. So for people that are preparing for like a 10 to 20 hour event, a lot of people say obviously you don't need to do the full time domain.
Right.
But for me, when I've done these long distance races, like kind of the time domain is almost what gets to me, I think. So how much of a percentage, or is there a rule that you would use?
Well, for me, again, it's maybe a little bit skewed, but like you said, I don't believe in like 12-hour training days, 14-hour training days. Like, that's just ridiculous. That's absurd. There's so much other types of training that you can include to prepare you for that long race day. But I say about 50% of that. So a 6, 7, 8-hour day, depending on how long you expect to be out there. I think that's plenty long for your long, slow duration days. But I didn't have many of those either. I maybe had 6 of those super long days. And then otherwise it's an hour workout and being smart about the work you're putting into that hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
The time in the saddle, I think, would get to me because it's 112 or 112 miles.
112 miles. Yeah. And so I did a few 6-hour rides and 7-hour rides, and I was fine. I mean, the last hour or two are pretty brutal, but you've just got to have the right bike setup, the right shorts, the right fuel, and then it's okay. But when it came to race day, that's where I actually struggled the most.
As far as... Even
though I had spent that much time in the saddle, it just... At Ironman Canada, 20 of the last 22 miles were all uphill climbing, and it was the hottest part of the day. And at mile 90, I was at 6 hours. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty much on target here. Like, this is where I want to be. I'll be done by 7 hours. Like, that was my goal for the bike. And those last 22 miles took me forever. It was so long and so hot and so steep, part of it. I was like, wow, I thought I trained pretty good for the bike. And that just came back, this kind of stabbed me right in the face.
Yeah. What about managing nutrition? So if you didn't do the long, how do you kind of know what your body needed? Or
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when it comes down to it, I think that's the most important part. And I think that's the part where most people fail, or where their nutrition fails them. So
that's where I like to fail.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So even though I was struggling those last 20 miles, I never cramped up. I really didn't actually feel like I was going to die. I didn't get sick. I didn't have any of those kind of issues. But I must have passed 4, 5, 6 people that were like on the bike, on the side of the road, puking, cramping up, just like dying because they weren't on their nutrition. You've got to have a good electrolyte source, and Gatorade is not it.
Right.
You've got to keep like 100 calories of quality calories coming in every hour. And again, everyone's going to be a little bit different, but there's like some basics that you've just got to follow. And if you don't, you're screwed. You better pee a few times on the bike. Maybe not while you're biking. Maybe you might want to stop. But again, everyone has different views on that. But I definitely stopped a few times to pee. But that's important. I mean, that means you're hydrated. And if you're not peeing, you're in trouble.
You're running trouble. Yeah.
And so different foods work for different people. But I've learned that the more like real food I eat, the better.
Okay.
So gel, goo, those kind of things, not happening for me. I mean, I had one just like when I need that quick sugar, like I can start to feel myself hitting the wall, but I use peanut butter, avocados, sweet potatoes, some baby food, like little packets. Even like at Starbucks, they have like a fruit kind of packet Some of them have the sweet potato ones. Like those are all really good.
Like the baby food kind of things, like Fuel for Fire.
Yeah, Fuel for Fire. I had one of those on the bike, and I had one for the run. Those were really good. And so everyone's got to find what works for them. But at the end of the day, you got to have good electrolytes, salt stick, Metasalt, salt tabs, whatever, and you've got to have calories, and it's got to be quality.
Yeah. So, sorry, go.
Do you feel like a lot of people make the mistake of like going for the stuff at the stations and then like not have tried it before and then running into trouble?
I think that's the biggest fault that a lot of people make. And it's tough. And trust me, at the end of the marathon, I was like taking a few things that I had never touched before. But at that point, I was just like, I'm dying. Oh my God, this Red Bull, this looks so good. And I like had a swig of Red Bull and I was like, oh man, it tastes nasty. Like put some water down my mouth. But I do think that's the biggest fault or the biggest problem that a lot of people have is, you know, they just grab what's at the aid stations because it's there, it's convenient. They didn't really come prepared. They didn't practice for, you know, the long days, and then they're just kind of searching, and then it just falls apart. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you said your rule is 100 calories an hour.
That's what I found works for me. Yeah, definitely.
Carbs or.
Yeah, that's up for debate too. This time I kind of went with, it was definitely more higher carb type stuff for sure. But what a lot of endurance athletes are shifting to now, and I absolutely think works, is a more higher fat fueling source burning. And I felt like I didn't have enough time to prepare to shift my body into that mode before this race because of the injury I had going into it and the lack of volume of those long, slow duration days. It's like I kind of just went with what I know worked for me, even though I wish I would have changed. And if I ever do it again, I will shift more to that high fat fuel. I think there is a time and place for a little bit more of those faster burning carbs if you start to like really lose it. You know, there's a place that it can pull you out, but the high fat it works. Yeah. And it's longer lasting. That's the key.
It's a much more efficient fuel source.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, for sure.
So right now I'm a month into the ketogenic diet.
Oh, and it's already been a month?
Yeah, it's been a month. And I'm running a 50 tomorrow. But so I agree. Like I've done a ton of research on it. I think that it's a much more efficient fuel source. And I think as a result, I'll need way less carbohydrates in order to keep going.
Correct.
The only problem I think that you see is that power output drops on the ketogenic diet. Like
I think on the front end, initially it does until your body fully adapts to it. In when it adapts at a high training volume or high training intensity.
Yeah. So would you just eat, or were you looking at your watch? Or I've heard a lot of people just set a timer. Like I'm gonna try to set a timer tomorrow.
Well, it was different. Like on the bike, you know, I have like a computer on my bike on the handlebars, so like pretty much every hour I could see going by. And so that was how I managed it on the bike. And then on the run, it's like I was looking at my watch. But the other thing is on the run too, like aid stations were pretty much every 2 miles. And so I knew, give or take, at about every aid station, I needed to eat anyways. That didn't mean I grabbed food from the aid station. I had my pockets full of my own fuel, and I would maybe grab a thing or two from the aid station. But that kind of let me know that that was about every 20 minutes, essentially.
Okay.
For me. So I kind of knew that, like after the first few aid stations, I was like, all right, I gotta eat again, you know? Right. And so, because during the run, I didn't wait every hour to like eat 100 calories at once, because I felt like my stomach would have been really upset at that point.
Sure.
So I was just doing 100 calories total per hour. So like every 20 minutes I was kind of putting some calories in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so if giving advice to other people that want to try like a longer event like this, do you think that it would be okay to try to use fat as a fuel source even if your body's not fat adapted?
I think they might struggle.
Yeah, I think
for sure. Yeah, I think you've got to have that adaptation phase and kind of basically educating your body that fat is a fuel source versus, you know, typical, the typical athlete or even the typical person is more of a carb fuel burner versus the fat fuel. So you've got to I'd say at least get 4 to 6 weeks under your belt of training before you kind of try to adapt to that. Now, if you're just doing a super short distance like sprint triathlon, or even an Olympic distance triathlon, you can kind of pull. A lot of like elite athletes don't even eat. Which is crazy to me, but
on the Olympic distance,
or they just have calories, like they have liquid calories in their bottles.
Yep.
But those are carbs. That's not fat.
Right.
There's maybe a way to get fat into your bottle now. I guess you could mix
coconut
some
oil
in there.
MCT oil maybe.
Yeah, MCT you could. But so I mean, in the end of the day, you've got to, your body has, you've got to get it used to the source that you want it to burn.
Sure. One good thing I think that even just for people to learn is when you go into a ketogenic diet, you start realizing how every single thing affects you that you put in your body. Right. Well, one, you realize how much sugar is in everything. Literally everything. There's nothing you can eat.
Right.
That's how it feels. It's the most desolate feeling in the world. It's friggin' awful.
Well, I'm about to start this diet next week, so at least I know I have some supporters.
Yeah.
So
I've done it before, but then I just got away from it a little bit. I still eat super clean, but I want to get back to it. I think it's absolutely the way to go to be a successful endurance athlete.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And people are starting to realize that, like the 100-mile world record holder for a 100-mile ultramarathon, Zach Bitter, he's a fat adapted athlete.
Yeah.
He ran 100 miles with a 7-minute mile, 11 hours.
Jeez.
Yeah,
That's
it's crazy. I've worked with a couple ultra runners. I did one ultra race myself last year.
Nice.
I did a 50-kilometer race in Squamish. Actually, I would say that was the hardest thing I ever did. That was harder and worse than Ironman.
No way.
Oh yeah.
Was it a lot of climbing?
8,000 feet of climbing, 8,000 feet of descending. And I was terrified of the climbing going into it, so I trained so much for the uphill. And normally I'm really strong at the downhill, and I struggled and absolutely got smoked and hammered in the downhills. And yeah, that just train downhill. Don't forget about it.
Yeah.
Because that eccentric strength and musculature, and then just that terrain I was in the rainforest, so it was tons of tree roots. It was rocky, it was slippery, it was mossy grass. It was freaking crazy.
Yeah.
That was actually way harder than Ironman Canada, for sure.
I do agree. I think people underestimate the downhill, and it beats the hell out of your quads, and then...
how was the downhill for you when you...
Oh, it was absolutely awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was absolutely awful.
Normally I enjoy it. I love it. It's so much fun, but when it's technical and it's downhill...
Technical, yep.
Wow, at the end, I was literally like walking down backwards because I just couldn't go down anymore.
Yeah.
It was embarrassing.
And that's the thing, if you're going downhill, you've already gone up, so your hamstrings are done. Now you just have your quads taking all the beating all the way down.
Right, yeah.
Don't underestimate the downhill. But staying on the nutrition topic for one more thing, you mentioned electrolytes.
Yeah.
And you said salt tabs, sodium, what other electrolytes?
So my go-to is basically in capsule form. Metasalt or Salt Stick. This is 2 different brands that you can get, and then it has all the electrolyte.
Oh,
all 5.
Okay.
Yep, are in that capsule. And then I also use in my bottle little tabs, flavor tabs called Noon. Super clean ingredients, and then it just changes up that dreadful water taste that you kind of just get sick of after a while. So at least you got some flavor in your water.
Yeah.
So those are my electrolyte sources for sure.
Okay.
My go-tos, yeah.
When you switch to ketogenic, the one thing that you start losing in your diet is electrolytes. And when I started adding bone broth into my diet, like I started drinking bone broth every day, my runs went way up. Like my training went way up.
That's
everything.
excellent.
Like it felt way better.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like that hitting the wall feeling. You just feel like really low on energy. Yeah, bone broth pulled me out of it.
Well, it's not quite the same, but they were giving out chicken broth on the run course at the aid stations, and that was one thing I definitely grabbed a few times.
Yeah.
Especially as it started to get dark, like it kind of got a little chilly and it was warm, and I mean, I know how much sodium was in there, and so I was like, yep, I'm drinking that. Obviously not quite the quality of bone broth. But
for a race, though, quality is not
for sure.
that important, I don't
But
think.
that's a big thing for people, athletes to integrate even in their training is bone broth. I mean, it has so many other good positive benefits. So don't forget about that.
Yeah. For my race tomorrow, I brought like 5 cup of noodles. Pretty excited about just drinking that. Like when it's cold at midnight. just drinking that broth is going to be amazing.
Where are you racing?
Julian.
Oh.
Yeah, it's 50 miles. So it's 12 hours. It's 8 p.m. to 8 a.m.
Okay.
And it's on a half-mile loop, actually.
Oh, it's half mile?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so many
terrible.
times of the same thing.
Oh my gosh.
I actually didn't know that when I signed up. I was like, I wanted to do, because I have a 100-mile goal. Like, I want to do 100 in under 24 hours. So I was like, there's a couple 50s I want to do along the way. It's more of like a training run for me.
For sure.
And I was like, 12 hours, I can run 50. If I don't feel that great, I'll run 40 or,
Yeah,
so
you can kind of choose, right?
Yeah, but then
if it's a loop course, but...
And I never
half-mile
do
loop
enough
course.
research. Yeah. Yesterday, I was reading that. I was like,
it'll
it'll be like an extra little lesson.
First of all,
in
what
pain.
race director came up with that idea?
Yeah, I
Second of all, read the instructions before you sign up for any more races.
You can say that, but you never know. But they have 100-milers that are on tracks now. Like,
I know, it's silly. Run in the
yeah.
mountains. It's meant to be run outdoors and in the wild. And
I respect it because it's like a different kind of mental toughness.
Oh, gosh.
It's like a whole other level.
That is
of
that's
being able to
another
suffer
level.
and go to a different place.
Now, do they switch direction?
I'm not sure. I haven't done one, but I know the world record for the 100-milers that Zach Bitter broke was 402 laps
of a track.
You have a track.
Of just the same direction.
Just getting it. I guess. I don't know.
You
if
want to
they
talk about
switch.
small use injuries?
Yeah, right? I'm just thinking about...
Maybe they do switch, honestly.
Yeah. That's
Well, that's what I
fascinating.
love about ultras. Typical ultra world is it's so variable, right? And
That's what I
so
like, too.
a lot of, not all, but a lot of ultra athletes honestly don't really have that much injuries because they're on different terrain, nothing's ever the same.
Yeah.
And so there's so much different input being put into their bodies that it typically doesn't get injured. I mean, there's some stuff that definitely breaks down always, right? But it's, compared to your actual track athlete or cyclist or marathon runner
running
on the
on
road,
concrete all the time.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
like the ultra runners are, far succeed in terms of the different, inputs, and they're way less likely to get injured because of that.
Yeah. I've been putting in like 60 to 70 miles a week right now, and my injuries have really just been muscular. Like I haven't had anything like real.
Yeah. Strains,
wood I can knock
aches.
out.
Yeah, definitely not
Find it.
So now you're working with the elite high school runners.
Yes.
Do you find that your training, since you're in endurance as well, does it change your opinion on how you work with people? Does that make sense?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes, yes, it definitely does. But I also have to realize, like, you can't battle their coach either. So, for example, these high schoolers right now are averaging 70 to 100 miles a week.
Wow.
As high schoolers.
For a 5K distance.
Yeah, for a 5K distance, maybe 6K.
Is that normal?
I don't think so.
It doesn't seem normal.
It's not normal.
I mean, they're the number one in the country, so I guess you can't say anything, but that's...
Right,
But
but
then,
2
years from now, what are those kids going to feel
Correct.
like?
It's like,
Yeah, I mean,
16.
yeah,
once they get to
Exactly.
college, I mean, they maybe make it through their first season if they're lucky, and then they're done. I mean, not done, but like they might make it 4 more years, but they have some serious stress fractures, tendinopathy type issues, fasciitis. I mean, you name it. They already are having it in high school, but I know by the time these kids get to second and third year of college, they're just going to be absolutely wrecked.
Yeah.
And it's also because all they do is run. And their movement patterns are terrible. I get these kids in and I evaluate them like, can you touch your toes? Nope. Can you squat? Nope. Can you lunge? Nope. Like, whoa.
Oh, man.
Red flag.
That's the shooting a cannon out of a canoe. With
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Huge motor and where to,
Yeah, so
all
these kids can
imbalances.
outrun me all day long every day, but like, they're all super broken. And yeah, I've had my run of bad injuries, but they've been kind of fluke and random a little bit. They're not from overuse. And so my big goal with them is just, honestly, I'm not going to change their mileage. I'm not going to convince their coach otherwise, but educating them on how to move properly and at least get more optimal movement out of them in terms of how they came in when I evaluated them to then when I, kind of released them and just trying to get them to strength train more. Mm-hmm. Even if it's just barbell movements. I mean, they don't know how to do any of it. They don't even know what a front squat is or what a back squat is. They're like, well, we're runners. I'm like, that's great. You should squat.
Yeah.
And you should deadlift. And you should know how to do those movements. Because when you get to NCAA, you're going to have to do them. Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. I mean, every college program has a strength and conditioning program, no matter what sport you're in. And so I think it's important for those high school kids to know how to do those movements. They don't have to be able to do a 1 rep max back squat, but they should be able to take a PVC and squat all the way, full depth and not have any mobility limitations at that age.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. But that's not the case at all.
And that's probably a result of volume and...
Pure volume and just running every day. And they say they do a little bit of core training, but
right.
It's again, the quality isn't there. The
sit-ups.
idea is there.
Do 100 sit-ups.
The idea is there, but then the quality, they're like, oh yeah, we do planks, and I have them come in and show me your plank, and I'm like, oh no, your spine is not neutral. You're not engaging your glutes, and you're not engaging your scapular stabilizers. Like, that's not a plank.
Right.
Oh, but we do it for 4 minutes. I'm like, yeah, but you're just hanging out in your joints and your ligaments. You're not stabilizing or activating anything that you need to be. And so, okay, plank is a great exercise, but it's only great if it's done correctly.
Yeah.
Wow. So there's a lot of work to be done, but
do you think that strength in general is or endurance in general is adopting strength?
Overall, I think it is a lot more. Yeah, I think I see a lot more endurance athletes starting to at least integrate some sort of strength regimen into their, weekly training program. Mm-hmm. Again, it comes down to quality, honestly. It's like, just doing squats and you're doing like a quarter squat or something like that and your knees are buckling in and you're not activating, engaging the right patterns. It's, you're only getting 50% out of it, but it's better than nothing. It's better than I think what we used to see. I think there's a little bit more of a shift, but there's still a lot of things lacking or missing for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are most of their miles on trail or track, or is it a mix?
It's a mix depending on the time of year. Yeah, at this time of year it's cross country season, so it's more on trail, dirt. Mm-hmm. Little bit road, and then during track and field season it shifts more to the track, but they still do run trail, dirt, road, so at least there's that. At least there's some variety. It's not all the same thing over and over, but it's tough. They do a lot of high intensity training is how they name it toward me, but their high intensity training is all run based. The high intensity training isn't movement based.
Okay.
Yeah. So if they could, in my professional opinion, if they could take out some of their high intensity run training and supplement movement based or strength based training, they would actually be so much better. Yeah.
When it comes to speed work, and that's what you're referring to with the high intensity? Yeah,
that's
like tempo work, speed work, that
exactly,
kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. What and I'm just curious from your point of view, what should your distance be when you're working tempo or speed work compared to what you are training for?
Well, I'm not a track and field coach, so
I'm picking your brain purely for me right now.
He's already writing notes for tomorrow.
I'm gonna change up my training program overnight. I think honestly, that's a tough question to answer because it depends on, in my opinion, what your ultimate goal is that you're training for. So these elite high school runners right now, they're training for 5 or 6K. So their tempo runs shouldn't even be that long.
Right.
They don't need to. Why would they be longer than that? That doesn't make any sense.
800 repeats, or what do you think?
Yeah, maybe even 1 mile repeats. I think, but that would be the longest.
Okay.
I can't tell you exactly what they're doing now. I don't know their training program that much inside and out, but then if you're training for a 50 miler, your tempo runs could be quite a bit longer, of course, right? But again, I still don't see that tempo run being longer than 3 to 5 miles. Mm-hmm. because again, in ultra, the terrain is so variable that how much does that tempo run actually translate? It's a little bit questionable, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely should be in your programming at some point, for sure. You don't want to say like, oh, well, I'm not running flat, so why would I run tempos? No, that's really not the case either. But you know, it ultimately depends on what's your A race of that year. What are you training for?
Right.
And then kind of looking at that and working backwards from there. And then sometimes like you'll just do other races, like you, for example, this week, but it's more of just like a training.
Yeah.
It's not really a race.
Are you incorporating tempos into your training right now?
So I'm not, only because I only decided to run ultras when I sucked in that 100 miler I did. I did a 100 miler without a training basically at all.
Yeah.
And then it was awful. And then I set this goal that I want to run 100 miles in under 24 hours. So now I'm like training. So I'm in like a base building period right now.
Okay, gotcha.
And I'm using this race Saturday to help build with that.
Oh, okay.
So going into your first 100 miler where you didn't train at all, does that mean you didn't run at all?
Right. I ran 6 times ish leading up to it.
But what else did you do? Like,
I
what was
lifted.
your
Yeah. I lifted
How
a lot.
often?
I mean, I lift every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
there's some
But
legitimate.
you still made it to what, miles?
yeah, I got pulled at 72, like because of time.
time cutoffs. Yeah, but I mean, it just goes to say that strength training, lifting, Metcon, CrossFit type of workouts can get you quite a ways through an endurance event.
Yeah. I agree.
Because it surely is what got me to the finish line. Now, obviously, I didn't get to the finish line as fast as I wanted to. I knew I wasn't going to reach my initial goal time, finish an Ironman in 12 hours. That got thrown out the window when I broke my leg. You know, that was just like, okay, 12 hours is not happening now. And so then I kind of shifted to like, oh, maybe 14. And then 20 days before I ran 12 miles and my knee just like blew up like a balloon. I'm like, maybe I just want to finish now.
Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, it just goes to say like, you don't have to have that ridiculous volume of 6 days a week, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day.
Right.
Swim, bike, run. You don't have to do that at all. That's just absurd.
Yeah. So you think people trying to get ready for this should absolutely mix strength training?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and you could decrease your overall volume of training and your overall risk for injury like tenfold.
Mm-hmm. What is your opinion on people logging miles on a treadmill?
Less than ideal.
Okay.
Who the hell wants to stare out the same damn window and
well,
go no
we're in
place
San
at no
Diego,
time?
but
exactly.
my mom training for a triathlon in Maine. Well, it's summer now, but in the winter,
right?
You know, she had her like bike trainer, and then she had her treadmill. It's like
So to me, that's why I live in one of the most beautiful places in the world, because I like to be outside. I want sunshine. I want fresh air. I want mountains. However, with that being said, I absolutely think there's some benefit to doing some of your training on a trainer, because you can track so much more. You can do a lot more interval-based training easier.
Okay.
On that trainer, you can watch your power output. And some people can do that on the road bikes too, but you're limited to stop signs and stoplights and whatever environment you might be in outside. So there's definitely a benefit to indoor training. Same with the treadmill. I mean, again, you know, we have our Garmin watches and we know our paces, but on a treadmill, like, it forces you to stay at that pace.
Yeah.
And I think that there's some benefit to that, but it's not for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's boring.
Part of the reason I do triathlon and ultra running and trail running and all that stuff, like, is because I love the outdoors. Mm-hmm. And so just to, like, do it indoors is terrible. Yeah. And when it rains here, it's like, oh, Jesus, it rained today? This is a good day to take off.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it hardly ever happens here, so it's okay. But yeah, people in other parts of the world and other parts of this country, like, they don't have a choice, and it's cool. It's great. It's better than doing nothing.
Yeah, I was more curious about what it does to your movement pattern or your stride, or...
Yeah, it definitely changes it, especially the treadmill. I think it's very unnatural. It's artificial. So I think that's less than ideal. But again, I mean, it can also, on the flip side, allow you to focus on some specific part of your form or your stride or something like that, because you can video it in place.
Right.
The debate is up about how much it translates. I don't know. But the bike is pretty much the same, indoor, outdoor. The variable is obviously no traffic. So being inside is safer. And it seems like every other week we hear someone getting hit by a car in San Diego. And so it's safer to ride indoors. But you don't have that necessarily like that balance component of being on the bike either.
Right.
Outdoor versus indoor. So that changes up a little bit. Again, movement patterns, muscle activation, all that stuff. But it's negligible, I think.
Okay. Have you run on a true form before?
Yeah, I have.
What's your opinion?
It's freaking hard.
Tears you up, right? Tears your hamstrings apart.
But it's super legit. I mean, and that's how we should run. That's how we're meant to run. And so I do try to kind of carry that idea or position of the more midfoot strike into my running. I'm a big fan of that. And I think that's a big reason that I could almost not train any running at all. And then I could finish a marathon without any foot pain, any shin pain, any knee pain. I mean, I was sore at the end for sure, but like just having that style of running, I think everyone should jump on one of those every once in a while, because A, it'll tear you up, but B, it'll really get you to understand like the position that your body's meant to be in when you're running, whether it's sprinting or whether it's endurance running.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we talked about that in a past episode where people will go to a running store, they'll watch them run, and then they'll give them a shoe based on how their foot is hitting the ground instead of telling them to change the way their foot is hitting the ground.
Yep. Yeah, we might want to save that conversation for another day. Yeah. But you're right on. That's exactly it. Yeah. But that's definitely for the next episode.
Okay. Yeah. We'll have you
she has a bit of a foot fetish, so.
But that's why.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's just, and nothing against all of our great running stores out there, but the athletes need to change what they're doing. The shoe and what you put in it is not going to change anything. Right. At all.
Well, cool. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't asked you about?
I don't know. We've been all over the place now.
Yeah. I like it. We went from Chinese Olympic team to
Ironman to ultra running, and I think I'm gonna dabble probably a little bit in some ultras again next year. Nice. 50K is maybe my limit. Okay. But I kind of like miss the mountains and running, and when you can't run, then you realize like, damn, this sucks. I kind of miss it.
Yeah. It's like an adventure, too.
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely an adventure. Cool. Ironman is also an adventure. There's a little bit of an adventure component, just like all the different pieces of the puzzle and fitting it in. And but so, yeah. It's
like, an adventure with logistics.
A little more structured. Yeah. You're right. A little bit more structured, for sure.
Anything that you want to plug? Where can people find more about you? I know you own a business as well.
I work with Movement RX now, primarily based in San Diego, but I do a lot of my own work in consulting internationally. I spent a lot of time in Korea educating them on PT and traveling back to China and just doing like mentorships and education. And so I have my own business called Olympus Movement and Mobility. Okay. And so it's kind of shifted now primarily to more kind of education consulting type work. Do a little bit of training of people on the side, endurance athletes, and trying to encourage them to strength train more.
Yeah, like remote training?
Remote training, exactly. Okay. Yep, online based training typically. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
There you go. If you want to work with an Olympic caliber coach, Olympus.com or
OlympusMovement.com.
OlympusMovement.com.
Yes.
Cool.
Thanks so much for coming on.
So much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Lionheart Radio. Don't forget to rate us and download our other episodes. For your supplement needs, go to louisvive.com, and for your sports therapy needs, visit movement-rx.com. This Midwest nigga be the coldest. Cleveland is the city where it's hustle or you hopeless. And my closet like a stove, bitch. Only difference is you ain't gon' find this in no stove, bitch. I'm fresher than your whole clique.